When I was about 8 years old, my family moved into a new neighborhood. It was one of those idyllic suburban streets where kids played outside until the streetlights came on, and everyone knew each other's names. Or so I thought. Our house was at the end of a cul-de-sac, and directly across from us lived an old man, Manor. Abernathy's house was different from all the others. While our lawns were green and manicured, his was a chaotic jungle of overgrown weeds and dying bushes. The paint on his house was peeling, and one of the front windows was boarded up with a piece of plywood. We never saw anyone go in or out, except for him. He was a tall, thin man who seemed to stoop under an invisible weight. He always wore the same thing: a faded brown cardigan, gray trousers, and a flat cap pulled low over his eyes. We rarely saw his face clearly, just the shadow under his cap and his long, bony hands. He had this habit of just standing. He'd stand on his porch for hours, motionless, just staring. Not at anything in particular, it seemed. Just staring into the distance. They said he was a mad scientist who did strange experiments in his basement. They said his wife had vanished years ago, and he kept her ghost locked in the attic. Of course, we were just kids with overactive imaginations, but there was an undeniable air of mystery around him that fueled our spooky tales. My first real encounter with him was on a hot summer afternoon. I was trying to learn how to ride my bike without training wheels, and I kept wobbling and falling over. My dad was supposed to be helping me, but he got called into work. So there I was, alone on the pavement, getting more and more frustrated with each scrape on my knee. Suddenly, I felt a shadow fall over me. I looked up, and it was him, Abernathy. My heart started hammering against my ribs. All the scary stories rushed back into my head. He didn't say anything for what felt like an eternity. His voice, when he finally spoke, was raspy, like dry leaves skittering across pavement. "You're pushing too hard with one foot," he said. "Balance comes from the core. Look ahead, not at your feet." I was too scared to speak, so I just nodded. I flinched, but he just gently adjusted my handlebars. "Try again," he rasped. "Look at your front door." I was terrified, but for some reason, I did what he said. I got back on the bike, gripped the handlebars, and stared at my bright red front door across the street. I pushed off, and this time, I didn't wobble. I was shaky, but I was riding. I pedaled a few feet, then a few more, until I was halfway across the cul-de-sac. I was so excited that I forgot to be scared. I turned around, beaming, to thank him. It was like he had vanished into thin air. He still did his routine of standing on the porch, staring blankly. But sometimes, I'd catch him doing other things. I saw him once, very early in the morning, carefully tending to a single rose bush hidden behind a mess of weeds in his backyard. Another time, I saw him leaving a small bowl of milk on his back step, and a stray cat would always come to drink it. These little moments didn't fit the creepy old man narrative we had all created. It was confusing. He was this strange, solitary figure who scared all the kids. Yet he had helped me ride my bike and seemed to care for a stray cat and a single rose. I grew up, and the neighborhood kids moved on to high school and part-time jobs. We stopped playing outside as much, and the spooky stories about Mr. Abernathy faded into the background of our lives. He was just a part of the neighborhood scenery, the strange old man in the dilapidated house. Then, one autumn, when I was about 16, an ambulance showed up at his house. It was a quiet, somber affair. We saw the paramedics go inside, and a little while later, they came out. He wasn't with them. We later learned from a neighbor, who was friends with one of the officers, that Mr. Abernathy had passed away peacefully in his sleep. A few weeks later, a moving truck and a cleanup crew arrived. His house had been sold. I watched from my window as they started clearing out the years of neglect. They tore down the overgrown bushes, repainted the house, and replaced the boarded-up window. One of the workers was carrying a bunch of old boxes out to a dumpster. As he tossed one in, a few things spilled out onto the driveway. Curiosity got the better of me, and I walked over. I told him I was a neighbor and asked if I could look. He shrugged and said, "Sure, kid." Among the dusty junk, I found a small, leather-bound photo album. I opened it carefully. The pages were filled with old black and white photos. There was Mr. Abernathy, but he was young. He was smiling, his arm around a beautiful woman with kind eyes. There were photos of them on a beach, at what looked like a wedding, and in front of a brand new house, his house. But it was bright and clean, with a perfect lawn. Then I saw photos of them with a little girl. She had his eyes and her mother's smile. They looked so happy. As I flipped through the pages, the little girl got older. Then, the photos of her stopped, looking a little wobbly but grinning from ear to ear. After that page, the album was just empty. I kept flipping, and tucked into the back cover was a folded, yellowed newspaper clipping. The headline was tragic. It told the story of a car accident many years ago. A drunk driver had run a red light. The woman and the little girl from the photos, his wife and daughter, had been in the other car. They didn't survive. His daughter was 7 years old. The accident happened just a few blocks from our neighborhood. The neglect of the house, the endless staring, the solitude. His world had ended that day. The boarded-up window was from his daughter's room. He couldn't bear to look in, or maybe couldn't bear for anyone else to. And then I remembered that summer afternoon. Me, a little kid struggling with a bike. Him, a man who had lost his own little girl, who was probably around the same age when she got her last bike. He was a father and a husband, frozen in time by a devastating loss. His raspy advice, "Look ahead, not at your feet," wasn't just about riding a bike. It was a piece of wisdom from someone who had spent decades unable to do that himself. He was looking back, always looking back. I put the photo album back in the box. I walked back to my house, and the neighborhood looked different. It wasn't just a collection of houses and lawns anymore. It was a place full of stories, some visible, and some hidden behind peeling paint and overgrown weeds. I never told the other kids what I found. It felt too personal, too private. Abernathy wasn't a spooky legend. He was a person, shrouded in a grief so profound that none of us could see past it. He taught me how to ride a bike, but he also taught me a much bigger lesson. That you never really know the story of the people you walk past every day. Sometimes the people who seem the scariest are just the ones who are hurting the most. If you have someone in your life or your neighborhood that you've made assumptions about, maybe take a second look. If you enjoyed this, please consider liking the video and subscribing for more stories. See you next time.